This is the E-commerce Brain Trust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our brain trust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hello, and welcome to the E-commerce Brain Trust podcast. I'm Julie Spear, Head of Retail Marketplace Services at Acadia, alongside my co-host, Jordan Ripley, Director of Retail Operations. For today's episode, we're really excited to have longtime friend of the show, Russ Dieringer, back on the mic to review some of Stratably's key takeaways from their recent round of survey data and research into the current state of brands optimizing for content for Rufus, an AI-driven search. So AI, the name of the game. Here we go.
It's the buzzword.
Yes, it is. And Rufus. I like Rufus as the buzzword. It's a little bit more fun. Before we get into the details of the reports, there's a lot of great data across all the reports that you have. I love to start from a personal or anecdotal perspective. Is not Russ like the data industry analyst, but instead is Russ the Amazon shopper. I'm curious to know how much you actually use Rufus and the extent that maybe that's changed over the course of the past year.
Yeah, good question. I would say I use Rufus on occasion, and typically I use it when I'm in more of a browsing kind of mode. And actually, just last night, I was using it to look up some like toy gift ideas for my kids whose birthdays are coming up.
Do we have to edit that out, or they know that you're getting them toys?
They're not going to listen to this, first of all. And second of all,
oh, man,
I was going to say,
little.
Don't they follow the show?
No spoilers.
It's not your audience, I don't think. They're more like Bluey and things of that nature. So I use it for things like that. And I would say, and then there's been times where I've used it just to get clarification. Is this compatible with whatever I'm looking for? For example, another recent purchase I used it for was shop vac, like filter bags.
Oh, yeah.
That makes sense.
That's a purchase right there.
Yeah, totally. That's Amazon for you. You can get everything. There's a lot of different bags, sizes, and that sort of, there's different brands and that sort of thing. And so I was able to use it there and it was helpful there. I would say more often than not, I found it to be useful. I know there's a lot of criticism out there of it and it isn't perfect. And a lot of shoppers maybe have seen that it just hasn't been helpful. Personally, I would say it has been. Now, if we go outside, in my opinion, of like industry folks, like the average shopper using it, I'm not so sure. Like I think about my family and friends, they're not talking about it like, oh, this is this great tool. And sometimes I'll bring it up and they don't know what I'm referencing.
They're like, who's Rufus?
Yeah, like they're just experiencing the site or the app and they don't care about necessarily the latest and greatest. They care about stuff that is really going to help them shop. And so I think it's very early days in that regard. But overall, my experience has been a positive one with it.
Yeah. It seems reflective, again, anecdotally, but it's function driven more so than people know Rufus as this big entity. That curious for us, again, going back to the research here, which we'll dive in momentarily, and I'm excited to do, but there's a whole bunch of different people that weighed in on this topic of like, how much are we optimizing for AI? You mentioned 286 different brands and agencies that all got back to you on this survey. And since this methodology kind of underlies all of our insights that hopefully we'll get to on this episode, I'm just curious, two questions related to this. I'm curious, like, if there's a sort of typical cohort across those agencies and brands in terms of like size and the kind of industry or verticals that they operate in. And just also when you're looking at this, are you coming in with a perspective and you're looking for these folks to validate that? Or this is, I come in with a blank slate and it leads me where it leads me?
Yeah. So in terms of the audience or the sample that participates in our benchmarking, it tends to be more mid-size and enterprise-sized consumer brands, and then the agencies that support those types of brands. That's primarily who our work is designed for, and that's primarily who attends our webinars, and that's like our primary client base. So the data that we're often getting is like most applicable or most representative of that mid to enterprise grade type of consumer brand. And then in terms of how we approach these studies, The nice thing is we're an independent research firm, so we don't really care which way the answers go. We're trying to get to the truth of the matter, so to speak. So that is nice. That independence is nice. But we certainly have hypotheses heading into these different studies, sometimes stronger hypotheses than other times. For example, we recently did some benchmarking around how brands' sales and retail media budgets have evolved or shifted since the announcement of tariffs in April.
Sure.
That's one where I'm not sure which way that was going to go. On the Rufus benchmark, I did have some hypotheses around what we were going to find. But again, we're open to seeing new information and changing our mind on some of it. I think the consensus around chatbots and AI generally in the consumer brand community was that everyone's doing this stuff and everyone's adjusting to Rufus and AI chatbots and like you've got to be doing it, so on and so forth. That was the consensus thinking. And I had thought going into the study that maybe we were getting a little over our skis, like in terms of practically speaking, are brands actually doing this or not? I know we're going to get into that. So it depends on the topic around what we're studying, whether we have a strong opinion heading into it and are set up to either be surprised or confirming what we originally thought.
We tee up my question really nicely there. One of your reports is very aptly named, "Are brands actually updating PDPs for Rufus?" And really what that boils down to, the data in the report shows that there are two key drivers in the industry as it stands. There's the ratio of AI optimization FOMO, everybody's doing it, got to do it, versus the extent of actual AI optimization implementation. Can you talk a bit about what you've seen relative to these two?
Yeah, sure. And I gave it away, I guess, in the prior answer to some degree, but really just a minority of brands have actually taken action. So just 12% of brands, the data said, and 20% of agencies. So agencies as a whole were a little bit further ahead than consumer brands, but just 12 and 20% have taken some sort of action to date, whether that's a comprehensive approach across all of their assortment or even just testing some of their assortment. The balance in the sample were essentially in process of going to or starting to test and learn or planning to do, but they hadn't really done anything yet. I think the takeaway from the data is that there is a lot of discussion. AI is top of mind for everyone. The disruption of the search bar is obviously, there's a lot of potential for that to happen. Consumer brands definitely feel like they need to be doing something, but most consumer brands, again, mid to large size consumer brands, aren't today doing all that much. So there's a lot of talk. There's not necessarily a lot of action when it comes to Rufus optimizations.
And your reports go further to dig into the why of that. What's holding brands back? What are some of the limiting factors that you uncovered through your research?
Effectively, there's just a lack of clarity on what to do. Amazon has been relatively quiet in terms of how Rufus functions and how it returns results, and they don't provide a lot of guidance necessarily on what to do. And I would say that a lot of these consumer brands are still trying to catch up on getting their PDPs to a great spot for just search. They're still trying to catch up there. And that's a moving goal, right? Those goalposts are always moving. There's never like an end game in that. But if you were to just ask these brands, like, how do you feel like your PDPs are? You're going to say, yeah, on some of our hero ASINs, they're great, but we've got a lot of work to do and that's evolving just for search. So they're just trying to catch up there, let alone trying to move on to the next thing. The under-resourcing around content has been present since I've been in the space for a decade. Part of that is it's just tough to measure. If we add these images, X number of images to a page, what will the impact be? It's very tough to measure that. Oftentimes, organic content doesn't really get as much resources and people to be at the leading edge. So I think a lot of brands are just trying to catch up, and then they just don't necessarily know what to do with Rufus. There's a lot of white papers out there that share insights on what to do, whether that's making sure that all of the back-end data is updated, embedding answers to questions that Rufus suggests for the products, embedding that into your content. So there's a lot of papers out there and that sort of thing that tell brands what to do, but it's just new. And again, they're trying to catch up. So that I think is a big reason why more haven't acted.
It's just another layer what's held brands back from PDP optimization over the years. It's just a whole other layer of it, more of the same.
And there's causing, in a sense, a lot of stress.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of angst maybe is the better word in the industry, because there's this new way of shopping and brands don't really have direct control. I know Amazon's testing ads and that sort of thing, but largely it's all just quote unquote organic, organic results. And so you can't really just pay directly $3.27 to show up on this slot. It's just, we don't know. It's this black box, and that causes angst. But then on the flip side of that is there's this retail media tax, and that causes angst as well, because you got to just pay in typical search engine results. You just got to pay for placement. So it's whichever way you cut it, it's stressful to be trying to win on this platform.
The big assertions and headlines of the death of the search bar, those things don't help ease the angst.
Right.
If that's going away and I don't know what the heck to do with the AI aspect of it, then my stress just intensifies. So I think some of what people put out there in death of search or whatever it might be, that doesn't help for productive moving forward.
And it's tough from an agency perspective, because the brands are looking to the agencies and their partners, be like, hey, what should we do? What should we do? And no one really knows with definitive certainty on what to do and what specific impact it's going to have. So it's just a very new part. Obviously, everyone listening knows that it's just a very new part of commerce and new part of Amazon.
I think the other thing too that adds to this, and this is why I think this research is so interesting, because you do a lot of research where it's like, how much did ABN trade terms go up? And that's very black and white. And this is the gray areas that exist here. Like traditional SEOs, I'm going to try to reverse engineer elements of the algorithm, right? If I put these keywords closer to the front of the title, does that let me rank better? You didn't have to know the algorithm, but you can know the elements and the levers that you could pull to position yourself better here. And now when we get to this era of large language models and things where it's like, a lot of the people that are building those models don't understand how those models work.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They don't know exactly how it's coming up with this. So how can they provide, in this case, Amazon, provide any real sort of guidance to the brands? That they can't.
Yeah, there's two layers of reverse engineering that have to go. I think of the Grecian myth where the person is always trying to drink the water and the water level is keep going lower. I feel like the neck elongated for us in the industry when they roll out this. The last bit of research that I for sure want to make sure we touch on is that whole component of measurement, which I think is perhaps one last sprinkling of angst on this topic. But the idea that even for the ones that are doing some implementation around this, how are they actually assessing that implementation to see what are the results around it? And you get, I think, some pretty clear takeaways here. Can you walk us through what those takeaways were on the measurement component?
Yeah. So to what we were discussing before, it's always been difficult to measure the impact of content changes on the business. And as I said, that has led to, in some respects, a little bit of an underinvestment, so to speak. In contrast, where retail media, its measurement is very complex in retail media, but at least has this veneer of being very measurable. I put in $1, I get $3 out, or whatever it is, and people gravitate to that, right? There's a real strong business case. But when it's, let's hire another person to really help maximize our content, what's the impact of that going to be? It starts to devolve, and it's not as easy to understand. So we knew heading into, or we believed heading into this question, that the results were generally going to be inconclusive, also heightened by the fact that a lot of third-party data tools that brands use for like sales and share measurement and that sort of thing, they're not incorporating visibility metrics from Rufus into their tools yet. So we kind of had that in mind. But nonetheless, we wanted to ask brands like, hey, if you have taken steps to optimize for Rufus, what's been the result? However imperfect they measure that. And of the ones that have done that, about a quarter of them have said they believe or they've seen a material or a modest positive impact on their Amazon business, whether it's from sales, traffic, or conversion. We're just asking them, like, what is your experience been? So 25% of the ones that have taken action have seen a positive impact. The balance, the other 75% indicate that they've seen no impact or they feel like it's too early to tell. Only a minority have taken action so far, and only a minority of those that have taken action believe that it's having a real positive impact. As that becomes more known in the industry, that's partly why brands are not itching to take action, because there's no one coming before them that's clearly demonstrating if you do, this is going to materially impact the trajectory of your business. That's what the data found, at least as of June, July 2025.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that stands out to me, and from like the challenging part of the measurement here, is like we talk about Rufus as like the end all of the AI interaction with Amazon, but presumably, clearly there will be lots of other interaction points for AI, right? Think that people highlight as super valuable, right? The review summaries, right? That's an interaction that sort of shapes the customer journey. That's AI derived, but not necessarily as clear cut as I'm interacting with Rufus and therefore I'm AI shopping. So I feel like the other thing that is challenging for brands here is that they want like a clean, like this is an AI purchase attribution, and we may never get there because it's something that's AI influenced versus AI attributed. And I wonder if that might be factored in here as well.
And maybe over time, the third-party tools will be able to provide insight, or maybe Amazon will start sharing some of that data in Vendor or Seller Central. That would obviously be welcome, and I think that would drive a lot of insight and then a response to it. But right now, it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, sure. Which I guess leads to the inevitable question, which is like, we know there's this sea change happening in the industry. How fast that sea is rising, I think, is what we don't know. And I saw there was that report from Adobe recently of like how much AI derived traffic is now being sent into Amazon for things like comparison shopping on Prime Day. And we have some directional signals that this is shifting. But as you said, the back end of that data is still missing. Based on everything that you've seen in this data, like where do you think the healthy balance is between I drop everything now because I need to focus on this versus I'm going to ignore this until it like smacks me in the face. I need to do it. Like, where should a brand be these days?
Somewhere in the middle of those.
No face smacking and no chicken littling.
I would say the whole tech world believes that AI, again, in quote marks, I know those listening can't see that, but because that's a broad term, but that's where all the attention is. That's where all the investment is. It's a disruptive, or I don't mean it in the Christensen sense, but it's a disruptive technology that is going to be and already is so important in so many different ways, including commerce. In contrast, this isn't like Amazon Posts or Amazon Inspire.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Or like rolling out a brick and mortar department store from Amazon or things of that nature, that those at their time got a lot of attention from the industry, but we're always, how big really is this? How important really is this? And this is different than that. So you don't want to ignore it. And I think you want to be experimenting with it and trying to gather what learnings you can from it, knowing they're going to be limited. A lot of the e-commerce leaders that I talk to, there's a lot of different initiatives that they're pursuing. And part of their job is just setting the right expectations around those initiatives. And so if I were leading e-commerce for a consumer brand, I would say, look, we know chatbots are going to be an important part of commerce in some way going forward. We don't exactly know how, but we need to start learning how they operate, what we can do to influence them, et cetera. This is not, again, going to change the trajectory of our business here in 2025 or even 2026, but we need to start learning. And we're going to do that through a test and learn mentality. So we're not betting the farm. We're not abandoning the SEO tactics and strategies that we've deployed and that we're trying to deploy, that sort of thing. But we need to be here. We need to understand Rufus and then other chatbots as well. So that's how I would, at least at a high level, sort of position this. We don't take the data. I think you don't want to make this mistake of only minority brands are doing it and most can't tell what impact it is, so therefore let's ignore it. I don't think you want to do that. I think you got to also think independently and critically about, is this technology going to be important over time? And you'd be an outlier if you said no. So therefore, you've got to take some measures here and try to learn what you can, and then hope the data comes down the line through Amazon or third-party tools, et cetera, like we were talking about.
Yeah, you can't sit on your hands and wait for the perfect playbook to reveal itself of this is how to do it. You got to get your reps in and understand it by actually doing it to see what the value could be. And when and if that walled garden of data comes out, you'll be ready to roll versus on your back foot.
Yeah, exactly. And how fun for the industry too. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's so new. It's so different. No one has the playbook on it yet. What a great opportunity to try different things and see if you can get an edge on it.
Yeah, if you went into e-com hoping for playbooks on everything, you'd be a sad individual.
Oh, you'd be so sad. Yeah, you'd be disappointed.
A foundation of curiosity that has to be there. And without it, you're going to be really stressed out all the time. You got to just be somehow invigorated by the unknown.
Exactly.
As always, it was great having you on the show, and I appreciate you coming on, sharing your research and your visions into the future, what's ahead for all of us, and how brands can kind of not put themselves on their back foot. Get in there, start playing, start learning, start testing, and eventually the playbook will start writing itself. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me again. And this is an important area to be watching and participating in. So we're happy to contribute a little bit of data to the conversation.